Hey everybody, in this video we are going to start to actually create the textures for our piano. So I have a pretty simple reference board here with the three main materials I'm going to be going over with you in the next video or two. But we're going to start off by working on the wood material. So when I'm looking at this wood material, I want to go with a stylized wood. Now I did research some stylized wood. I'm really a big fan of the Blizzard art style, and therefore I found a few pieces I thought kind of represented that. Another thing I found there is I want to make sure to find something that had a bolt, because there will be a couple bolts in ours. I'm not really crazy about this particular kind of twisting, turning, but I really do like some of these in here, some of this kind of a look. But with that being said, nothing that I have in my piano is going to quite stagger the way this one does. So I think I might kind of use some of this look here, like the kind of color palette, some of this color palette as well. But I wanted to do kind of in this way, where it's long and all the way up to the edge of the piano. I also do like a few of the elements in here, like some of the lighter colors variation. And then, of course, like I said, I like to have some of these bolts in there as well. So what we're going to do is we are going to first start off on the top portion of the piano here. Actually, let's see. Let me real quickly just pull this reference board to the side. And let me see what piece I want to work on first. Okay. It might make some sense, and I'm only going to do one little portion, so I'm not going to do all of it. But I think it actually might make the most sense to work on a piece that's on the side here, so therefore you can kind of see a few different techniques that I want to go over. So what we're going to do is we're going to locate this. I'm just going to draw it real quick. Now the way I can do that is I'm going to open my wood texture, and I'm going to create with my wood texture open, I want to then create a new paint layer. So that's just this add paint layer button. And now you'll see layer 2. I'm going to call this, I guess you don't really need to even title anything, but if you want to, you can title something like, wood boards, if you want to do that, or maybe just wood grain. It's still up to you. For now, I'm just going to leave it as is, and I'll probably title it later on. So I do have here, you can see there's my layout of my piece. Now, when I am texturing, though, I do like to work in base color mode, so it's really flat. Helps me kind of see my color palette a little better, whereas this is going to affect the lighting, and I might get some kind of poor lighting there. So, with that being said, the issue I have here, let's see, the issue I have here is I cannot see where, when I'm in base color mode, I can't see where this ends and the next piece starts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my display settings, and I'm going to scroll all the way down until I can find show wireframe. I'm going to toggle that on. So with wireframe toggled on, I now can see a little better. I can also move this wireframe opacity up, and I can also change the color of the wireframe to, let's say, black. And I find that a little bit easier to manage. So now I can see exactly where one ends, next one begins. Whereas here, material is fine, but it's just hard to really comprehend the color that you want to go for, especially in this style. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to scroll in a little bit, and I have this reference board on my other screen, so I recommend you do the same. But what I want to do is I want to do a few things. I want to, rotate this palette so it's, this is a little easier to draw on, because I know I want to draw on this piece right here. And also notice is as I'm drawing here, you'll see I'm actually drawing other pieces too. So like over here being drawn on. So that's the first thing we're going to change. Is I want to go to my brush. I'm going to right click my brush. I'm going to scroll down on my brush settings. So I right click on the open area. And I'm looking for alignment. And where it says tangent wrap, that's by default. So that means basically it's telling you that it will draw on anytime that a UV in the 3D space, such another UV, it will draw right on there. We want to change that just to UV. So now what I can do is I can draw all over, and you'll see it's not going to draw on this other piece unless I come over and actually draw on it. So it's not going to do this kind of neighborhood bleeding deal that you were seeing just a moment ago. So next thing I want to do is I want to hold my Control or my Alt button. I'm going to just rotate this, and I hold Shift, and so Alt, rotate, and then I hold Shift to lock it. And now it's locked in place, and I can just zoom in with my scroll wheel. And now we're zoomed in right here, and this is the area right here that we're working on. We are only retexturing this area for this video. I'm not going to worry about the front here. It's just not necessary for what we're doing right now. So first thing I'm going to do is I want to come in here with a very soft brush and some bold colors. I want to start to kind of brush on various colors. Now, myself, I prefer to use a tablet. Actually, I have a touch tablet in front of me that I'll be working on. But you can also just use a graphics tablet without the display. That works perfectly well. And if you really want to, you could use your mouse, but if you can avoid using the mouse, if you can instead use your graphics tablet, I would strongly recommend that, considering that the you are drawing. It's really hard to get organic looking shapes with a mouse. There will be times where I will grab the mouse and I'll use it for whatever reason, but for the most part I'm using this pressure sensitive tablet for drawing. So now with that being said, I want to change a few things. So I'm going to right click over here, and I'm going to start at the top. So first we have our size. We don't need it to be that large. So I'm going to move it something like, we'll say 3 for now. Now with this enabled, so you see how there's this little pin pressure button enabled. So with that enabled, you'll see how you can kind of draw there, how it starts off small and gets big. So what 3 means, that's the max size it'll go. So as I draw, the less pressure I put, the smaller the width of it will be, but the more pressure I put, the more thickness you'll see, up to 3 pixels thick, which is perfectly fine for what we're doing. Let's see, and then we have our flow is fine. Our opacity, we want to move the opacity way down. I recommend something like 10. And now you won't really be able to see it very well for especially colors that are a little closer, but that really gives you this organic look that the more you build up these colors, the more you'll see it. So you can adjust it. There'll be times where I'll move it as high as 50, and sometimes where I'll move it as low as 3. But for the most part, I want to keep the opacity fairly low, like 10 to 15 is kind of my goal. Everything else here should be good. Now the only other thing that you want to perhaps change will be your hardness. We want to usually keep that pretty soft brush, but doesn't mean that you can't. At times you might need a really hard edge. But see how that you kind of get that pixelation there on the edge? And that's because it is a very hard edge. So I'm going to keep that brush to a very soft edge. And now the last thing, we can turn off all these other elements, is we only want to use with color here. And I can now adjust my color. So I'm going to click on this color picker. I'm going to pick something in the wood grain family. And then I'm going to move it up a little bit. And then when you move it up, you also want to maybe shift the hue just a hair too. So I'm just going to move that hair, or move the color up a little bit. And so now you see this really soft difference in color. That's good. Actually, I want to make my brush a little bigger. So I'm going to make this like, let's say in this case 5. Oh, it's pretty good. So I'm going to start doing here, maybe even bigger than that. I want to start just kind of painting in, and I'm going to use my tablet here. I'm going to start just painting in these kind of organic looking brush strokes. And we will start to kind of build up this wood grain look. I'm just kind of going here real softly, some hard strokes, some light strokes, and overlapping a little bit. And you want to go all the way to the edge here. You want to make sure that you go beyond the piece, because if you just go right to the edge and stop, you're gonna get this really awkward looking kind of edge there. And I already have a little bit of that going on here, as you can see. So I want to fix that a little bit. You just want to start off by drawing in a few pieces like that. And now what I want to do is I want to go back to my eyedropper tool, and I want to select something here. And I can also just go, I want to change this. So I'm going to go back to my base color. I want to select the color. I want to make it even more red in this case. And again, I'm just looking at my reference. Right now I'm just trying to build up a kind of an inventory of colors here to work from. So now I'm going to throw in some red colors in here. You might want to double down and do it twice perhaps. But as you see here, now we're kind of getting some difference in our colors. And it's starting to look a little bit more unique. So it's kind of a fun way to go about it. And then I'm going to right click again. I want to make this a little bit lighter, something like that. And I'm just going to come in here with maybe a light color. You can kind of do this however you want. So now we have a few different colors in here. Actually, let's go one more. I'm going to go with a deeper, let's go more almost like a purplish. I want it to be like very kind of gray purple. I might come in here a couple places and kind of really highlight that a couple times. So yeah, something like that looks fine for me. Okay. So what I'm gonna do now is I have this kind of base layer laid down. I'm gonna look at my reference again. And now I want to start to draw in these areas where the boards should be going. And now for this, I'm going to use a much smaller brush, a harder brush, and a much darker brush. So in this case, I think maybe 3 boards will be enough for what I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my brush settings. I'm going to take this purple. I'm going to go really deep purple. So not quite black, but almost black. And then we'll go back to my brush settings. I'm going to change the size down to something like, say, 2. And then I want to change the opacity a little bit higher. I'm going to move the opacity to like 25 for now. And the hardness I want to move to 0.5. So now when I draw, you'll see right there. It doesn't look very dark, but then if I draw over multiple times, you'll see it gets darker and darker the more times I overlap, which is what we're going for. So first I want to just draw, I'm going to look at my reference, I'm going to draw a board. I'm going to divide this to 3 pieces here. So it doesn't have to be a perfect line. Actually, it's probably better if it's not a perfect line. I'm going to go back and forth a couple times on this. Maybe kind of waving it, so therefore pieces that are overlapping are going to look darker, whereas some pieces are not overlapping, so it's going to look a little bit lighter. And I think that looks okay, so I'm now going to go to make my next one. I'm going to draw this again. You want it to be fairly straight, but you don't want it to be so straight that it looks very man-made. You want it to be a natural line there. Okay, so that's pretty good, I think. You could, of course, come in here. You could draw horizontal if you want to draw a couple like slatted pieces, perhaps. That's not the design I'm going for. So what I do want to think about now is at what point or where are these kind of imperfections in the wood coming from? So, I can see I have some imperfections here. I have imperfections I can draw there. There's some imperfections. Various places I have these kind of wood grain imperfections. So I'm going to go in and start to find where I want to place those. And I think I'm just going to kind of organically draw this. So I'm going to draw a wood grain there. It shouldn't take up too much of the board. Like this is probably as large as I want to go for any one piece, any one grain. Also, think about having kind of jet out from the board itself, like the board's splintering, like that. And you can have some of those kind of wooden, I'm not even sure what they're technically called, but kind of like hole-like elements, like corkscrew elements. I'm not really sure. Sorry. Yeah, so you have something like that, perhaps. If you want your wood grain to give it kind of a little bit of a character there. I do recommend having pieces of the wood kind of fray at the ends, because that's a really easy place for it to kind of get a little bit warped and corrupted, is right at the ends there. So maybe if it was really far in, maybe just barely cuts off the corner, like you see here. I have my corner kind of cutting off right there. Now this is just more or less a block out, because we will come back through one more time with a little more harsh of a line. So there's some more. And then here I want to have this one come pretty far down. I want to then twist a little bit right there. I want to then cork all the way down. There you go. And I want to then have something coming through up here. Okay. So now I have some of my wood grain drawn in. Okay, so now I'm going to come back through here one more time. And I want to draw in some additional detail. So now I'm going to lower my opacity and lower my opacity if I want to. So I'm going to lower my opacity, move my size up just a little bit. And I'm going to come in here with some real light detail. So, kind of just again to give a little more texture, a little more thickness to it. With the same dark purple gray brush. I might actually want to even overdraw some of this gray stuff. That was pretty okay there. And now I'm going to go ahead and use my eyedropper tool. I'm going to pick that original brown color I had. I want to then lower my size a little bit, up the opacity a bit. And we'll come back through here and just kind of draw in a couple different grains over it. Yeah, it looks fine. Now this is a very subtle process. It's something that you really won't notice immediately. It's something that you kind of build upon, like you're just putting layer upon layer until finally something starts showing. And that's going to give you that kind of real look. Now, if I were to do something like this and start drawing, it's not going to look very realistic. It's going to just be a little bit too brash. Now, there'll be times where we can go that high, but in this case, we're just going fairly low. Now, I want to change the color at this point to something a little bit brighter. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to make that a little brighter. So let's see. So now that's a little bit too hard of a line. So I'm going to make this even more soft. So at this point where I might move down to 8 and go with a really soft hand. And what I want to do is anytime you think about what you're trying to do is you're trying to draw or to trick the viewer to believing they see depth someplace where there's not any depth. So what I'm going to do is anytime there's like a crack, the crack basically means it's being pushed out, or the darkness means it's being pushed out, whereas the lightness means it's being pushed up. So what I'm doing here is I'm just drawing some places where the wood might kind of corking towards the outward, whereas the darkness is the wood actually being pushed in. So I'm just going here and drawing some highlights to create this illusion of kind of the wood being pushed away from the board, giving a little bit of a depth there. So I'm thinking about when you're making these, think about where your light source is. A lot of times in this, if you don't have a particular light source in mind, it's kind of a good rule of thumb to just use a top-down light source. So anything that's kind of below will have a little bit of a shadow. Anything that's above will have a little bit of a highlight. As you see here, I'm kind of using the highlight towards the top half. So things are actually seeing the top part. So as you see on my left screen, things are starting to come together a little more. Now, I might come through here again with a even brighter color and even softer opacity to really just like make things shine. And you'll especially see that more in metals. Like wood doesn't really shine. So I might come in here with like a little bit of a pale yellow to really make it pop. But for the most part though, you're going to see that more in the metal family when we get to that soon. We'll talk about kind of how to make these items shine. So now that I have this wood kind of started, I'm going to go in and I'm going to make really dark, and let's go with a maroon or red magenta kind of color. I'm going to put the opacity up to 20, or let's say 30 in this case. Around 30 is fine. I'm going to move the size down a bit. So now I have this really hard line. Maybe the opacity should be more like 40. And the size could be down to something even smaller. So I'm just going to type it in. I'm going to put the size down to 1. And so now you see we have this hard line. And let's go to 50 here. There you go. Okay. Let me see. So now that I'm pretty confident this is where I want all my pieces, I'm gonna come in here with a really kind of dark black line. I'm not gonna draw right down the middle. I'm gonna try to draw more or less on one side. So therefore, as you see here, I'm just drawing the left side of this dark piece, because in the right side it has this kind of illusion of it being a little bit less in the shadows. So I'm adding depth by just drawing the one side of here. And at some point you're probably gonna have to draw a little bit towards the middle, but I'm repeating over and over because I want it to be really thick. Also want it to be really organic. So there you have a little bit of more depth there, because now the range of color is, black, complete black, meaning that it sees no light. The white means it sees all the light, or in our case, pale yellow means it sees all the light. So therefore, if I make something black, you're going to see little to no light. Okay, so I'm going to now go through here, and I'm going to find a few other areas where I can maybe pop that black. Pop that black in there a little bit more, or that really deep black, I should say. Like right here, this can be a really dark area, since that should be very little seen. And you can always up the opacity if you really want to. I don't want to up it too much. Okay. So there's another piece of wood that's pretty much, basically complete for what I'm going for. So I'm going to get in here and just kind of push some of these elements down. Don't have to push the whole thing down, just pieces of it, to give it a little bit of a, and I like to say that the thicker the pieces, the thicker the line, the more kind of gouged it is. So therefore I typically find the insides, towards the middles being more gouged, whereas towards the ends being less gouged. So therefore the ends are going to be a little bit lighter. So like this piece right here, I feel like in my head it should be really gouged right there. It should be pretty gouged right around here, since it's kind of this corkscrew design. And then towards the end it's not going to be very gouged. Okay, so now we have that kind of look. And the last thing to consider too is the board does end. We actually should be able to see the end of the board. So right here, I'm going to go down to the bottom here of this board. And I'm going to make the brush a little bit bigger. And I'm going to start to just draw in where I think the board should end. So here's some places I think the board should end. And the thing is, you want to be able to see it on your left screen. Oops. You want to be able to see it on your left screen, the actual board ending, as I do. See that? And so you can kind of draw on your right and just really kind of keep an eye on your left screen or your 3D version of it. Make sure that you are indeed able to see the bottom of the board as I can. Go ahead and then same thing for the top. So scroll into the top. It doesn't be completely black, but it should be a little bit darker, so therefore you can kind of see where it's happening. Okay, so now we have that piece, and I'm going to go and turn off my wireframe real quick, and so we can take a look at it. So it's starting to look a little bit nicer. You're starting to see that wooden texture, and we add in some lights. It's going to help it kind of sell that illusion a little bit. Now another thing I might want to add in here, just to kind of again sell that illusion. I think that this lacks a little bit of white or lighter colors. So I might come in here, I might throw in a few of these throughout here, maybe just kind of diversify it a little bit, give it a little bit more of a kind of thickness to it by adding more color palette to it. But do be careful, because it doesn't take a lot to really convince the viewer that they're looking at something with thickness. But the next thing too is I'm going to come in here and add in this case I might add a fill layer. I'm going to call this fill layer shadow. Now I'll make this shadow, I'll make the shadow a nice deep purple. I think purple makes really good shadows. And now I want to change this from normal. I'm going to change it to multiply. Let's see how that looks. So multiply looks okay. So as you see here, when it's turned on, it's a lot darker. When it's turned off, it's a lot lighter. So I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to actually add in a black mask. And then on that black mask, I'm going to add a paint layer. And so now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start to paint in, and I'm going to use a big brush here. Look at my brushes. I'm going to use a big brush. So 10, there you go. I'm going to use a big and soft brush, maybe something like, let's go 20. And I want to start to just think about where this shadow is going to be in, kind of with when the shadow is coming down. And I want the shadow will be covering up this area right here, or the top pieces will cast a shadow on the side a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and start to draw in some of that shadow. I'm going to change this to UV again for my alignment for my brush. And I'm just going to come here. I'm just going to use in this case, I'm going to use my pen or my mouse. Or maybe I can come here. I'm just going to kind of draw in a few little shadow pieces. And now if this is too dark, the nice thing about using the way we are, we can always come in here and we can make it a little softer. We can also blur this a bit if we want to add a filter. We can blur this so it's a little bit of a softer transition. So maybe something like that. So you don't really notice it until it's there, but it will help add some depth to your piece. So I think that looks pretty good like that. And so that's kind of a really quick breakdown of how I create my wood material. So in the next video, we're going to go over how I create my metal material for this particular piece.